My main purpose here this morning is to introduce you to a fellow New Yorker whose work in the energy and environment space has earned him the respect and indeed the admiration of many across our great country. But before I do that, let me take this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. As you heard, I'm a member of Congress. I'm Paul Tonko, representing the 20th Congressional District in the capital region of New York. That area includes great cities that are part of that Milltown activity. Those of the past, those like Schenectady and Troy and Albany and my hometown of Amsterdam, Saratoga Springs, and then our capital city of Albany. It also includes institutions, however, such as RPI, a leader in engineering and research, GE and their Global Research Center, creating the products and ideas of tomorrow, Superpower, a world-leading developer in superconductive cable, Paper Battery Company, a small business that has developed energy in small structural sheets, and Energy Rotors, a startup that converts waste heat into electricity. And there are many, many more. And every one of those that I just mentioned are here today. That's because the capital region is a hotbed for innovation, for high-tech investments and jobs that allow people in that clean energy arena to earn not only a career opportunity, but a great salary at the same time. And for anybody today who is looking for a place to start a business, I'm happy to share the exact coordinates of my congressional district as a marketing agent. See me after the program. On a serious note, however, just 9.8 miles from here is our United States Capitol, a place that is currently debating a concept called the sequester. Now, if sequester sounds like an invention an engineer might have made in an incubator in your near town, it does to me too. My background, as I said, is that of an engineer. I received my degree from Clarkson University in upstate New York. And as an engineer in Congress, I think it is incumbent upon us to actually solve these problems that face a complex society and not just point fingers. But the sequester does just that. It cuts spending indiscriminately, hurts the economy, and leads more toward uncertainty when we can least afford that uncertainty. That's why I voted against the measure when it came up, and sequester, I believe, is not the answer to solving and resolving a sustainable path. Like many of you, I know good ideas and good inventions, such as many that are displayed here with the ARPA-E projects, come from investment. And it is these investments, completed with targeted cuts, that will balance the budget. After all, the sequester is a good way to get rid of a great program and a terrible way to keep a bad one alive. But enough about the sequester. We are all here today because of a program championed by the President and this administration that realizes the high potential of high-impact energy technologies that are too early for private sector investment and are unique because they are developing entirely new ways to generate, store, use, and transmit energy with upgrades even to the grid. I would like to commend the vision and service of Secretary Chu, with whom I've had the pleasure of working. He's been standing up and carrying out this program since its inception. He was at the table to help design it. His leadership and his service to this country and to the Department of Energy will be sorely missed. And I ask that we, again, share some round of applause for Dr. Chu for the great leadership that he has provided. Now, if there's a message that I would impart, it is that we are in a society that needs to create, explore, design, discover. You do that as agents of ARPA-E. Speaking of leadership, I want to introduce a man who believes the big cities must take the lead in reducing the threats of climate change. In 2007, he announced a revolutionary sustainability initiative, Plan YC 2030, to make New York City the greenest city in the country. Released in 2007, Plan YC was an unprecedented effort undertaken to prepare the city for 1 million more residents, strengthen our economy, combat climate change, and enhance the quality of life for all New Yorkers. Already, New York City has greened 15% of its taxi fleet, planted more than 315,000 trees, adopted the nation's most ambitious green energy code, as dozens of city buildings have improved their energy efficiency, helping reduce carbon emissions, and saving the taxpayers money. The list goes on and on and on. He has proven that green means jobs, green means success, green means a better tomorrow for not only New York City, but all of our great country. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you a very wonderful fellow New Yorker, a great leader, the mayor of our great city of New York, the Honorable Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Let's welcome Mayor Bloomberg.
Thank you very much for that. Well, good morning. Paul, thank you for those kind words, and it's an honor to join all of you here today. I can tell you the weather in Washington is much better than the weather in New York this morning. It's part of the mayor's plan to eliminate the drought, and I'm doing a very good job at that today. Senator, good to see you. Let me also join Paul in congratulating Energy Secretary Steven Chu for these past 4 years. Secretary Chu, you should know, is not only the first scientist to ever be our Energy Secretary, he is the first Energy Secretary with a Nobel Prize in Physics. So another thing I don't have in common with him, but he really has transformed the Energy Department and put it at the forefront of shaping our nation's clean energy future. And ARPA-E may very well be his most lasting achievement in that regard. And I also wanted to thank his longtime colleague and ARPA-E's first executive director, Arun Mazumdar, for summing up this mandate very well with the few words, to promote the stuff that sounds crazy until it changes the world. And I think that's a very good way to look at it. Now, many of you here have just these sorts of projects in mind. Not every one of them is going to change the world. The laws of probability actually say that most will be flops, but I'm highly confident that the overall potential of your work is going to make a very big difference. After all, in a previous life, I was a tech entrepreneur myself back in the early 80s, which is, I guess, the Stone Age in terms of today's technology, long before anybody knew that there were such things as tech startups. I started a company, and eventually we came up with some game-changing ideas. And I think clean energy research today is at the same thrilling takeoff stage that information technology research was back then. In fact, its excitement is so contagious that I was tempted today to present my progress on near isothermal compressed air energy storage systems. I thought that was funny, guys. But then run through my research using hydrogen-eating microbes to fuel unmanned deep space probes. But wouldn't you know it, I left my slides at home this morning, so you're not going to get the benefit of that. Instead, let me just say a few words as New York City's mayor and as a concerned citizen of the world about energy on a policy level and about our nation's energy policies rapidly disappearing, outdated, and polluting past. I flew in this morning to National Airport right by a coal-fired power plant that has, thanks to the Sierra Club and the low price of natural gas, been shut down. They are ripping down the plant. There's no more coal. They're remediating the land under where they stored the coal. And I think that represents the kind of progress that we are making and have to continue to make, not only across this country, but around the world. We are far healthier and have a much more hopeful present than we've had before. We are heading towards the sustainable future that we all want, a future where the air we breathe will be far cleaner and will be more secure from the dangers posed by climate change, and where our economy will be on a far firmer and more secure footing. First, as to energy policies polluting past, I guess you can sum it up in one word, and that's coal. And even though the coal industry doesn't totally know it yet or is ready to admit it, its day is done. It used to be said that coal is king, and regrettably coal continues to be king in nations like India and China, as recent ghastly images of air quality in Beijing and also yesterday's disturbing news in the New York Times about child labor in Indian coal mines both show. But here in the U.S., I'm happy to say the king is dead. Coal is a dead man walking, and the coal-fired power plant I just talked about that's being decommissioned and ripped down is as good evidence as you need. One of Washington's biggest sources of air pollution was this coal-fired plant. It was upwind from Congress, so you would have thought they would have done something about it a little earlier, but they didn't. In any case, it's now a history, and the best part of that history is that it's no longer there. The Harvard School of Public Health concluded that that plant's pollution was responsible for something like 3,000 cases of asthma and close to 60 deaths each year. And that 60 is just some of the roughly 13,000 deaths a year in our nation linked to coal-fired power plants. Last time I checked, there was not one death from fracked natural gas, nor one death from nuclear plants, but it's coal that is really killing Americans, and if we can get rid of that, nothing is perfect, but we'd certainly be better off with virtually all of the alternatives. 6 months ago, the GenOn plant that I just talked about ceased operations, and that story is being repeated coast to coast. Even in the historic heart of America's coal industry, Western Pennsylvania, where one coal-burning power plant after another is now going extinct in favor of using cleaner fuels. What's ailing old King Coal? A number of things, but one of the things I'm proud of is a grassroots campaign called Beyond Coal. It was started back in 2002 by the Sierra Club and other groups to prevent the disastrous expansion in the number of coal-fired plants across America. And Beyond Coal was so successful that there are virtually no new coal-fired power plants being built anywhere in the United States today. Back in 2011, Bloomberg Philanthropies agreed to help extend Beyond Coal to go after existing coal-fired power plants with the goal of retiring 1/3 of the nation's coal-fired capacity by 2020. And today, only 2 years later, we've got commitments in place that put us halfway towards that target. So let me say again, today 1/6 of America's entire inventory of coal-fired plants is slated for retirement. But that does mean that 5/6 are still there. We also have a lot of work to do. Health and safety concerns have been crucial to the downfall of King Coal in America, and I think there is a growing recognition that coal doesn't deserve its reputation as a cheap fuel, and not when you consider its enormous public health costs, including the thousands of annual fatalities coal creates. There's also coal's huge and dangerous impact on climate change. Coal burning, you should know, accounts for 40% of our nation's carbon footprint, and such carbon pollution is accelerating climate chaos worldwide. For example, climate change may or may not have caused Hurricane Sandy. That's one for the climate scientists to debate, but I don't think there's any dispute that a set of unusual climate factors significantly intensified Sandy's deadly and destructive force. Sandy was stoked by warmer than normal ocean waters, and it was amped by rising sea levels, and because our warmer atmosphere also holds more moisture, when the storm came, it packed a greater wallop. And a lot of this is because of the pollution that coal puts in the air. 8 years ago, New York City and the government of several northeastern states warned against precisely such climate impacts. We did that in a lawsuit designed to require major coal-firing utility companies to cut their carbon emissions. The suit went to the Supreme Court, and the justices made it clear that the Federal Environmental Protection Agency does have the authority and the duty to take action to reduce climate change and climate pollution. Today, with the terrible toll that Sandy took firmly in mind, we're ready, I think, for the next round in this struggle, the long regulatory trench warfare that will determine just how tightly and effectively the EPA clamps down on carbon pollution. There's another big factor, as I said before, in coal's steep decline, and that is America's newly accessible, abundant supplies of natural gas. We all know that advances in fracking and horizontal drilling technology account for new supplies of natural gas that have lowered wholesale prices and have made a big difference, and that have also helped to cut America's carbon emissions to levels we've not seen in the last 20 years. Plentiful, clean-burning, and low-priced natural gas is both freeing us from coal's polluting past, but also giving us that healthier and more hopeful energy present that I mentioned earlier. Natural gas really does have the potential to benefit us for decades to come, but only if drilling is done right in a fashion that protects the environment. And that's why I have joined the Environmental Defense Fund to strongly advocate sensible regulatory safeguards And it's why we're continuing to urge holdouts in the natural gas industry to stop resisting such measures, because history shows that when industries resist sound regulation, they really don't help their own cause. Instead, they set themselves up for disasters caused by the worst rogue players. And responsible leaders in the natural gas industry, I think, know we need sound regulation, and we need it soon. Now, I know that many of you here are intensely committed to renewable energy sources and not to natural gas. Like you, I do believe that America's renewable energy future, but I also believe that natural gas and renewables should be seen as energy allies and not as energy antagonists. Yes, natural gas is a carbon-based fuel with all the downsides that it entails, and yes, there should be a price on carbon emissions from all fossil fuels, including natural gas, either in the form of a carbon tax or a cap-and-trade regime. Otherwise, renewables will never compete on a level playing field. But there is something to remember as well, and that is that until you discover the whole energy holy grail of being able to store electricity, we're always going to need backup complement to renewable power sources. And the transition to renewable energy as the dominant source of our electricity is going to take some time, and natural gas is an important way to fill that gap, one that is far better for the planet and for our lungs than the coal and oil that it replaces. Now, in many ways, even without our having to put a fair price on carbon emissions, renewable power is coming to town. The Obama administration, Secretary Chu, and ARPA-E deserve enormous credit for all that they have done to encourage renewable power. Over the past years, production of renewable power in our nation has more than doubled. The renewable energy targets set by many of the 50 states are hugely important as well. Today, for example, wind power generates 25% of Iowa's electricity, and Texas wind power accounts for 10% of the state's electricity. Solar power, wind, geothermal power are all on the rise because of actions in other states as well. And you should know that New York City is also making a difference. In fact, today, I'm happy to say, New York is the leading big city in energy innovation. That starts with energy efficiency, a major goal of our sustainability agenda, which we call Plan YC. Our city government is leading by example. We try never to ask somebody to do something that we're not willing to do ourselves. Since 2007, we've completed or begun energy refits of some 250 city buildings. We've also assembled the largest public database in the country on private sector energy use, information that owners and tenants are going to use to increase their energy efficiency as well. And working with our city council and our real estate and construction industries, we have passed the most ambitious green buildings laws in any city. And although its provisions are still being phased in, they are already having a big effect. And so is our Clean Heat Initiative, as we call it. It is encouraging thousands of apartment buildings in our city to convert from heavily polluting and inefficient number 6 and number 4 grades of heating oil to cleaner, more efficient fuels. We've also assembled the largest clean energy municipal fleet in the nation, and we're working to make New York far more hospitable to privately owned electric vehicles as well. This is the air we breathe, our children breathe. This is what sends our kids to the hospital with asthma attacks, or what we do to prevent them from having to go to the hospital with asthma attacks. We can talk about climate change and things down the road. In New York, we're concerned about what we do right now, and we're not going to wait to do things for later on. If we do the right thing today, the future, I've always thought, will take care of itself. The results of all the work to date, as I mentioned, greenhouse gas emissions are down nationwide, but they've dropped much further and faster in New York. As part of our Plan YC, we set a goal of shrinking our city's carbon footprint by 30% by the year 2030. And today we've already cut those greenhouse gas emissions by 16%, putting us more than halfway to our goal, and that's compared to a 9% decline nationwide. You can gauge our success by measuring energy usage against the economy and population growth as well. Our economy went into recession with the rest of the nation and has rebounded briskly over the last 3 years. But since the recession ended, the number of private sector jobs in New York City has increased nearly 7% compared to an expansion of less than 4% nationwide. And since 2005, our population has grown by 250,000 people. But the most important thing is our air quality is, according to the American Lung Association, better than it's been in more than a decade, with all the more economic activity in people. So we really are making a difference. And going forward, our renewable power initiatives will do even more to increase New York's energy efficiency, shrink our carbon footprint, and clean the air we breathe. Take, for example, solar power. Our administration's tax policies have jump-started a 5-fold increase in solar capacity over the past 4 years alone, and I was happy to find out, I had nothing to do with it, but my company at our big computer facility has rented some farmland, and we now generate 70% of all the energy we use just from solar. Even in the Northeast, the sun is still powerful, and you can still use solar. We've added solar capacity in the city to its facilities in a way that's going to catalyze even more private solar financing. And then there is offshore wind power. We're not neglecting that. We're working with state officials and our principal utility, Con Ed, on a major project just 13 miles off the coast of our city. Cogeneration, another thing, converting waste to energy, turning waste gas into marketable natural gas, using the tides in New York City's East River to generate electricity. We are moving ahead on all of those fronts and others right now. So, in short, there are exciting energy times in New York, and the pace of innovation is only going to get faster, and that's because we've made a huge commitment to New York as a future hub of applied science research. As many of you may know, Cornell University is going to open a graduate campus right in New York City, joint with Israel's Technion Institute. Columbia and NYU are doubling the sizes of their engineering schools, and all of that's going to bring more technology and more people that understand the problems and are willing to address it. Partnerships we forge with these major universities will double the number of engineers in our city in the years to come, and we think that they will put New York in the forefront of shaping our nation's energy future. We all talk about technology, and everybody rushes to think of social media, but the bottom line is energy technology and biotechnology and lots of other kinds of things are really the things that are going to make the big difference in our world. We have to have a sustainable future, and achieving that sustainability includes a major energy engineering challenge that really is important today and that will become all that more important as we go forward. So let me finish up with a few thoughts about that challenge. Making our energy infrastructure more resilient and resilient to becoming to the increasing common extreme weather events. I suspect today that there are a lot fewer climate change doubters around the world. There may be a few about the mounting climate threat our nation and our worlds are facing, but even those people are starting to have second guess, and Sandy certainly brought all that into focus. Sandy significantly damaged virtually every element of our infrastructure, including our energy infrastructure. At the worst point, we had some 800,000 customers in and around New York City without power, and the process of restoring power to many thousands of New Yorkers who had lost so much in the storm was painfully slow. So we are rebuilding from Sandy. We've learned our lesson. We're modernizing our city's energy infrastructure and hardening it, and that includes incentivizing large buildings and hospitals to invest in cogeneration systems and to explore how we can accelerate investment in distributed energy, microgrids, energy storage, and smart grid technologies. Now, none of those are new ideas, but they certainly have a new sense of urgency. And I might point out that's not true just in New York, but in cities around the world. I also chair the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, which is an organization that brings many of the world's great cities together to address our shared climate change challenges. And in C40, we're acutely aware that 2/3 of the world's largest cities, like New York, are increasingly vulnerable to rising sea levels, storms, and floods. And such cities from Jakarta to New Orleans and from Ho Chi Minh City to Washington are all in a race against time. Our ingenuity, our commitment to using that ingenuity to create a sustainable energy future really are critical to winning that race. If we want to have a better world for our children and for ourselves, we've got to do something now. And that's where all of you come in, and why it's so important that in your work you heed the advice of Secretary Chu, who is so well known for giving a quote, "Always resist the urge to accept the status quo." And I think that's good advice for all of us in our lives of trying to make this a better world. If you follow that wisdom, then I'm confident that your success, as well as the best days for our nation and our world, is still ahead. So thank you one and all for having me, and thank you for what you do. We need leadership, and we need people to stand up. And if we in this room do it, maybe the rest of the world will follow us. Thank you. All the best.